Hey there, Sugar Daddy here with a quick video on how I do the oil changes on my 2012 KLR 650. Very simple procedure, doesn't take a lot of time, but it'll give you years of service from your motorcycle, just this regular maintenance thing. So let's head out into the garage and let's pick out the proper tools. Okay, the things you're going to need to change your oil, and this list is going to be specific to a KLR 650, a Gen 2, but the things you're going to need are socket wrench, 8mm socket, adapters, depending on the size of your socket and your socket wrench, a hex bit adapter, a 6mm hex bit, a torque wrench, an oil filter that fits your motorcycle, whichever brand you choose, enough oil of your chosen brand in the weight specified by your manufacturer to change the oil, a funnel, and or an old oil container that you've cut the top off of so you can use it to pour oil into your engine, a piece of aluminum foil, manual for the motorcycle that you own, and various rags for cleanup. Also not shown, you're going to need an oil drain pan to collect your old oil. To start off with, over at your bike, go ahead and put your oil catch pan in place, and you can go ahead and take the top off, the lid off, the screw cap, and also the drain plug. Make sure those are open and slide it into place roughly underneath your drain hole. Not too far back, as the oil will shoot forward a little bit and it could miss the drain pan. The next thing that you're going to want to do, go ahead to your oil fill hole and open that up. Doesn't have to be open all the way. Just enough so that air can flow through but nothing falls in is good, so just loose. After that's done, take your foil and put that manipulated underneath wherever your filter housing is. That way, once you take the filter housing cover off, any oil will just flow down and it should be caught by the rags, or you can move the drain pan over depending on how you want to do that. Now, depending on the drain plug that you have on your bike, I have a hex bolt on mine that takes a 6mm hex. Along with that, I need a hex adapter for my socket wrench, and because it's recessed just a little bit up in there, I also like to use a length adapter just to give, so I can reach the socket, the hex, all the way up there. Now, your bike might have just the common socket drain plug, so you'll need to know which size you need, but again, for me, I have a hex bolt that I use, and I actually have to move my drain out of the way just a little bit to get it in there. Make sure that that your wrench is set to lefty-loosey. What I like to do is just get my drain bolt loosened and then slide my pan back in place and remove the bolt the rest of the way. Moving my drain pan as I see fit. Now here's a tip for you before you start doing this. You might want to run your bike for a little bit just to get your oil warm, just so it flows a little bit better and makes this job just that much easier to do. As you see, there's the bolt out and it has the hex fitting on the end of it. In addition, there is a washer. My washer this time stayed up attached to my engine, so I'll have to get that. I forgot to mention that you will need a new washer if you haven't replaced yours in a while. I usually don't replace mine every time. I just try to use it maybe 3 or 4 times or until it starts looking nasty, and then I'll change it for a new one. And while you're waiting, go ahead and clean off your bolt, your drain bolt, and set that aside so it's not lost. I can see my washer in there, so I'm going to reach up and get it. And there it is there. This one actually still looks good. I changed it the last time, so I'm going to reuse this one. And just for safekeeping, after I've cleaned it off, I'll just stick it right on top of the bolt. Here's another little tip. While your oil is draining, once it starts to slow to a trickle, like that, tip your bike up. This way the oil that's stuck to the side of the crankcase gets a chance to drain out, just to get as much of the old oil out as possible. And you can go ahead and put the bike back down. Oh. As you can see, my oil has started just a trickle that's coming out. I just like to leave it for as long as possible. I go ahead and get my torque wrench ready, set to 17 foot-pounds. While I'm waiting for that, I probably edited it out, but when I was taking the bolt drain plug off, I actually broke my 6mm hex. It just snapped off. I don't know why, I don't know how. It just snapped off. I only have one. I could use just an Allen key, a hex key, but I want to be able to use my torque wrench, obviously. So what I did is I dug around in I have a Torx set, and I'm using a T40. The T40 Torx fits inside of the drain bolt, which is a 6mm with absolutely no slop. So I'm going to use that to torque down my bolt until I can get a new hex wrench, or a new hex. I'm going to go ahead and wipe using a rag. Wipe around the drain hole just to clean off that surface. Just clean off the mating surface as best you can, just to keep any dirt or grime or anything from getting pushed back up in there. And then go ahead and take your drain bolt, again just using my fingers to tighten it as much as I can. Making sure that as I spin it, it doesn't get cross-threaded and I don't feel any grit or anything like that as I spin it in, because that would mean dirt was up there. My torque wrench is ready, but don't use your torque wrench to tighten. Use your socket wrench. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure that it's set to righty-tighty. Insert it and just gently snug it up, basically. Then I transfer everything over. To my torque wrench. Make sure my torque wrench is set to righty-tighty. Check again, make sure it's set to 17, and I can go ahead and torque this bolt down. Make sure it gets up there first. And that's it. The next thing I'm going to want to do is move my drain pan out so it's underneath my foil, which is underneath my filter housing there. And I can go ahead and remove that filter housing cover. On the Gen 2 KLRs, it's an 8mm. Those are 8mm bolts. Very easy. Loosen those up. Make sure my foil is in place, and I can go ahead and pull this cover off. But it's not too tight. And you can see how the oil just drains straight down onto my oil, into my oil pan. I like to clean off all of my surfaces as I go, make sure there's no dirt or anything that's going to get trapped in the engine that the oil filter doesn't have to filter out. So I go ahead and I wipe that down, the cover down. This surface here does get dirt around it, so you're going to want to wipe that down also. Just get all the schmutz off. Like so. And there is a rubber gasket. I'm going to check the condition of that. Just poke it a few times, make sure it's still supple and everything. Clean the cover off. Just give it a good wipe down. And then set it aside. I generally use Fram oil filters. And there's a reason why. Not because I think that they're a better filter than any other filter, but for one simple thing, like I mentioned to you just a few seconds ago, on the cap there's this gasket, this rubber gasket there. Well, the Fram oil filter, it comes with an extra one for that. So if you need to replace it, you can go ahead and pull that one off and put a new one on. Now if you need to take it off, if you need to replace this gasket, just a small flathead screwdriver inside the gap, you can pick it out and it pulls right off. Set it aside and take the new one. Just stretch it around there a little bit and slide it right back onto place, and now you have a new gasket. No worries about any leaks. Now that it seems like most of my dripping has stopped from my filter, I'm going to go ahead and pull it out. And your bike may vary. Again, this is specific to the KLR. Inside of the filter here, there is a tube, metal tube, that comes out like so. Save that, because you do not get an extra one with the filter. This goes, if you can see it, there is a small end here. I guess that's a chamfer. That end goes into the engine, and it gets inserted into the filter. The filter itself does not have a front or a back, it just is a filter. So you can either leave the words out, or you can leave the non-marked side out. It just inserts in, like so. Make sure it goes all the way through, so that you can see the edge of that chamfer. So there's the filter, ready to go back in. It just slides back into the hole, and that tube seats down in there. Once the tube is seated, if the tube and the filter were not flush where that chamfer is, go ahead and push the filter in just a little bit, and now you know your filter is flush with that inside part of the engine, of the inside of this filter housing there, and you'll be able to get the cover on, no issues. And then I'm going to take my filter housing cover and place that back on. Once that filter cover is on, you may or may not need to give it a few taps with a rubber mallet. So once this is back on, you can go ahead and put your bolts back in for that. Again, make sure finger tighten them first. Make sure they're not cross-threaded. Tighten them all the way as far as you can with your fingers. Pushing in on the cover. Okay, here's why we have our manual out, so we can find out torque specifications. The oil filter cover bolts are 78 inch-pounds per the manual. For my bike, the oil volume specification with the filter change is 2.6 liters. So I have a quart, no, I have 4 liters here, and I have my funnel. I can stick that in there, maybe, somehow. And then I have this also, and I usually use this just to measure, because it has the clear sections here where I can measure. And I know I need 2.6, so like 1,000 is up to here. So 2 of those, and then 2.6. Once you've got the oil filled, what you want to do next, if you have a sight glass on the side of your engine, like the KLR 650 does, is you want to make sure that the level is correct. KLRs are notorious for burning oil. Luckily, knock on wood, I haven't had that issue yet, but the lower mark here for the KLR and the upper mark here, basically traditionally, I guess, anecdotally, it should basically, for the oil level should just fill the whole glass. This measurement should be taken with the engine off and the bike cold. So basically, as soon as you've poured everything in, go ahead and just hold it up level and check the oil level in the sight glass. And it looks like if I tilt it back just a little bit further past level, it comes into the top, the bubble comes into sight, and straight up and down as much as I can, the whole sight glass is full. So that's it. What I'm going to do now, I turn the bike on, I let it run just for a minute or two, just for a second, just to get that oil circulating, the new oil, and then that way oil is going through the filter also. And what I like to do is measure the sight glass again, just to make sure. So let's get the bike started. Even though I know I just said, yes, engine off and cold, so all the oil is drained down. Once the bike is running and you get some oil going through this filter, this will take up some of the oil that you've seen in the glass. So you just want to make sure that once the bike has run and the oil filter has soaked up a little bit of oil, you still have a good level down here. So let's get the bike on for a second and check that. Running it like that is just to make sure that any oil that the filter picks up that goes through the filter is going to be replaced in the sight glass. And just let it drain, 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 drain. There you go. There's the lower mark. Well, there's a lower mark here on this side. There's an upper mark. Oil should be filling this whole window. And you can see the frothing is just because filling it the first time, yeah, you're going to get that from an oil change. But as I hold it, you can see the 2.6 that I put in there puts it right at that upper mark for the KLR, though, because I guess they like a lot of oil. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more just to fill up the rest of that gap. Yeah, there you can see, I've added a little bit more. You can already see that the bubbles are starting to dissipate from there. And that is just about level. So maybe a few drops more, and then we should be good. So there you have it, an oil change on a 2012 KLR 650. It's an easy thing to do, about 20 minutes or so once you get everything down pat. This might have taken a little bit longer because I was recording. But it's cheap maintenance, 30 bucks compared to the price of an engine. I do my oil changes every 1,500 miles, give or take, just because of that, because oil is cheap, and I don't worry about the service intervals, 3,000 miles, 5,000 miles. 1,500 is fine for me. I'll do it then. It gives me something to do, and it gives me a chance to look over the bike. Once you've done the oil change, and since I've done the oil change, what I'll do is just overnight, I'll just make sure I watch it for leaks, just to make sure. I work from the bottom up with the drain plug, the oil filter housing cover, and then the fill plug itself. And as I go, I torque everything so everything is done as I'm going. That way I don't have to worry about, oh, did I forget this, did I forget that? I just know, just from doing it, it's torqued, and then tightened, and I'm finished with it. But again, like I said, I'll still check for leaks in the morning or overnight, after overnight. And then before I leave for work tomorrow to ride, I'll make sure that the oil level is where it needs to be, which it usually is. They're a pretty simple thing to do, just really simple. Simple thing. It's a simple thing to do. If you appreciate that video, please consider hitting the subscribe button down below and also the bell notification so that when I do upload a new video, you can be notified of it. And I hope to catch you next time on The Sugar Daddy Show.